Boom. And we're live. We are live. Too long. It's been too long since I had you on. It's been
It
too
has
long.
been. Oh, it's been too long since we've spoken, G man.
Yeah, I know.
I've been having withdrawal symptoms. I've missed you, man.
Yeah, we met
It's
in
been a
person,
while.
and then we haven't even spoken since then. You'd imply we didn't like each other, but no, we
Yeah,
definitely do. We definitely do. We're good mates. No, I got
we
a
are
lot of
good.
time.
We are
We
good.
are good mates. Now I know you don't need any introduction. 5,000 subs you just recently passed. Congratulations if I haven't already said so. But why not introduce yourself? Let people know who you are.
Okay, before I do that, I do need to establish one thing. I'm traveling away at the moment. And so I'm staying in a hotel. And the reason I have to tell you this is because I know a lot of people are going to look at that pink photo behind me of a cat with a pink robe and they might think this dude's suspect. We need to check the hard drive. So I've got to let you know this is not my chosen art, right? That's the first thing. Secondly, you can find me on YouTube at Chris Andre Boxing, on Twitter at BetBoxing. But basically what I tend to do on YouTube is cover some themes of the day, boxing themes of the day, some technical analysis. When I'm covering themes, I try to look at sort of angles that maybe others haven't thought of and just try to shine sort of a light onto different ideas. We have deep dives into psychological aspects of the sport. We will look at, science if it applies, history, philosophy, whatever it might be. So we dip our finger into a variety of things, but they're all related to boxing.
Mm-hmm. That cat looks like it's staring right through my soul. You know that? The eyes on it was just locked at me.
You feel bad. Imagine having those eyes right behind you, freaking me out. I don't know who picked this for his hotel room, but have you ever seen those horror movies whereby you have, I don't know, there'll be like a kid at the end of the corridor, like The Shining or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one. Don't you think that's kind of spooky? I don't know who picked it, but I don't know, man. She's freaking me out.
Yeah, he's got some weird fetishes. We'll leave it at that. Whoever picked it out, big up to Karma, saying her two favorite guys. Salute to Karma every day. Great lady. But we speak.
Karma is.
She is fantastic. No, she really is. She's been subscribed to the two of us for a while. Always there to support us.
She's brilliant, man. I really like her sense of humor, just everything. She's just brilliant. She's quality.
Oh no, she is tremendous. She really is. You touched on in your intro psychology. Now, this fight we're going to talk about, because it's the only fight really on people's minds. I think it's all about psychology. Anthony Joshua, Oleksandr Usyk, the rematch. Now, me and you haven't yet done our predictions. I think we're kind of all waiting until next week before we start getting them out. But let's do a little preview. What have been your thoughts so far in the build-up to this fight? And what are your thoughts going into it?
So, I'll be honest, I differ slightly from the prevailing narrative. Mm-hmm. I think Oleksandr Usyk is justifiably the favorite. And I think that Anthony Joshua will have to overcome some serious obstacles. Many of them are mental. But I do believe Anthony Joshua is an elite level heavyweight. And I do believe that this is another big test for both men. I would not be surprised if Anthony Joshua wins this fight. In terms of his psychology, I've done a video in the past on the psychology of Oleksandr Usyk. And I spoke about how, in my opinion, he may have the consummate mindset for a fighter. Very difficult to shake, very difficult to get to. But I also have to say that although there are gaps in AJ's psychology, if he comes through this fight and wins it, we have to tip our hat off to the inner strength of the man. Because there's no doubt, in my opinion, that he has self-doubt. But you're talking about a guy that's had a lot of pressure put on his shoulders. He became a champion earlier than he should have, in my opinion. They had that Charles Martin opportunity. They took it. He then took the Vladimir Klitschko fight a little bit too early. He's always been taking on big challenges before he was really cooked, in my opinion. And then that Ruiz fight came. Weight of the world on his shoulders. He lost the fight. And then he has to come back and try and silence the critics. And even since then, I don't know if you saw his most recent interview on JD Sport, the JD Sport interview or whatever it was. And he was basically talking about how he's never felt that he had the right respect in a way and that he didn't feel as though he was feared, which was interesting to me that he was speaking in that way, because as a heavyweight who's knocking everybody out, you want to have that aura about you, but that's just not who he is. A lot of people, in my opinion, get AJ wrong. They think that he's putting on a fake persona and trying to be corporate and nice. I actually think that's the real AJ. He's a nice guy. And when he tries to act like he's bad, that's when he's trying to be something he's not. So there's a lot of pressure on AJ. And if he's able to come through this, I think we're going to have to give him an awful lot of respect because he's up against a brilliant fighter. who's mentally very, very strong. And so AJ to match that mentally would be an unbelievable achievement. So I think it's going to be a terrific fight. I really do. I think that whatever happens, if AJ loses, I believe he'll go out on his shield. I think he'll go out like a warrior. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I don't know what your take is on his mentality at the moment.
Yeah, my take on his mentality is a bit kind of, it's a weird one. Like, I'm kind of looking at AJ and I'm seeing him acting out a character in certain interviews. So, like, we go back to last year where we saw him being interviewed by Kugan Cassidy. I think that was actually in Dubai, where in the split of a couple of minutes, he went from don't offer my team, no, don't mention, step aside money, don't mention this. Should we consider it? Now, that's interesting because people would say, like, oh, Tyson Fury would do that. And I'm like, yeah, Tyson Fury, that's just 1 week he says he knows Conor McGregor, the next week he says he's never even met him. That's just in his character. But with AJ is kind of, when he says something, he kind of tends to stick with it. And he doesn't tend to kind of go back and forth on what he said, certainly not in one interview. And I think that even at the first press conference where he tried to stare Usyk down and Usyk was just having none of it, for me, I'm starting to think, like, did AJ kind of get it into his head and almost have a come to Jesus moment when he met Usyk at the press conference that I'm this badass, I'm going to intimidate him, I'm going to do this. And it's almost like when he was actually there face to face with Usyk, a bit like I've said, going to a job interview, doing all the preparation, everything, and then you're finally there and you're like, oh, now it all becomes real. I thought it was kind of something like that, and maybe he is starting to overthink things again. And that's something I worry about in the ring. I think AJ has the physical attributes to beat Oleksandr Usyk. But if Usyk readjusts to what he's doing, could AJ start the mind race and him overthink things again?
Well, when it comes to a tactical perspective, the way that I believe Anthony Joshua can win this fight is very different to how I've seen anybody else sort of talk about it. And that's not to undermine anybody else's view. I just see it a little bit differently. Your video, by the way, brilliant video. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Last time I looked, it was over 40K.
Nearly 50K now. I'm
delighted. Nearly 50K.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Nearly 50K. Flying, baby.
But, viral video. There you go.
Viral video. But yeah, so I see things a little bit differently. I will get into more detail when I do my own technical preview on how I think he should approach it if he wants to win the fight.
But I think we all have that knocked in our calendar, like Chris Andre's technical breakdown for this. We can't wait for it.
You're too kind, G-Man. There are a lot of great channels out there that do great technical breakdowns. I'm just trying to share what I see. And then, you know, if it plays out that way, it plays out that way. But G-Man, your compliments made me lose my trail of thought. I'm getting old. What was it? What were we discussing? What was the question?
You have a different view on how AJ can win this fight to others.
Yeah, but prior to that, I'm getting old. I think
it was mainly just AJ's mentality.
His mentality. So I totally forgot what I was going to say. I'm getting old. But basically, yeah, when it comes to Anthony Joshua, for me, there is a method that he needs to approach it in order to turn the fight in his favor. I do think he's got the ability to do so. He's also got the ability to lose. I've remembered what I was going to say. When you were talking about him potentially facing him and thinking, okay, you know, he's created a persona. I definitely agree that happened. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure, though, whether it would have made a difference if he did try to approach it as this alpha male dominant figure trying to put it on Usyk, or whether he sat there and was kind. And, you know, a lot of people make this this big hoo-ha about, oh, he let him touch the belts or he took a selfie with him. I get that. I do get that. But when Anthony Joshua is sitting there and he's talking about gangsters that have inspired him and stuff like that, is that really something that I think is fake? And
AKA Skins really inspiring people. He puts fear into people, doesn't he?
Right. You see what I'm saying? So for me, I don't know, man. I do think there is something to gain from a psychological deep dive. As you know, I do a lot of videos on it in terms of behavior. I did a very detailed one when it came to Josh Taylor and Jack Cattrall, and, you know, certain things that, you know, ways you can plant seeds of doubt in an opponent's mind and things like that. But with Anthony Joshua, to me, it's almost like he's trying to be something he's not, but in the opposite way that people see it. I think he's the one that's trying to act tough, and the real AJ is just not like that. And to win a fight against Oleksandr Usyk, I don't necessarily think he needs to be this tough guy that wants to put it in his head that, you know, I've got to act in a certain way. Mentally, he's got to have that. Inside him, he's got to have that fire. He's got to think to himself, I want to destroy this man. I want to hurt this man. But how he conveys that to the world, to me, it's not the biggest of deals, to be honest with you. And he probably burns up a lot more energy trying to big up his chest and talking a certain way to Oleksandr Usyk, who doesn't seem bothered at all. That probably affects him in a more negative way, to be honest with you.
And it will probably, the fact that Usyk just kind of saw right through that to me, that would create seeded out in his mind. Rather, if he just kept it inside and didn't let it out, the fact that he's doing that and it's kind of Usyk just saw straight through it, to me, that's a kind of like, it's going to knock a little bit of that confidence out of you already.
Exactly. That's my point. Because what happens is when you're trying to put it on someone psychologically, you're trying to bully them. You're trying to do something to get in their mind, and everything just slips off them like Teflon. It bounces off. They're bulletproof. Well, that's your first act of psychological warfare, and it failed. So your first attempt to get in this man's mind, you saw that failed. Then you're getting online. And you're looking at various channels saying Anthony Joshua's mentally weak. He's hugging somebody on the way to the ring. He's got to change up. So now he starts to think, okay, what do I need to do? Let me start talking about gangsters and how they inspired me. And like, I don't know. To me, it's like you're wasting too much energy on other things. Lock all that out. Don't worry about that. Be yourself. Be you. Find that inner spite within you. For sure, you need to find it. But don't worry about how you come across. Don't worry about what you're conveying. Get your tactics right. Be willing to go to a place mentally and physically and emotionally that you've never been to before, because you're up against a very special fighter. And don't worry about the persona that you're conveying, because you're not going to spook this guy. That's how I see it. It's a waste of energy. And if it fails, it's an act of psychological warfare where you're failing. Do you remember when Chris Eubank Sr. was going to fight Collins, and they convinced him that, this guy had been hypnotized, and he came in with and Eubank was a sort of guy who had this persona of decorum, and yet he was a tough guy. And he would get in people's minds with, little comments that he would come out with. By failing to get in Collins's mind, he started to believe that this guy's really hypnotized and he's invincible. It backfired on him. Do you see what I'm saying? So
yeah, I remember that well, actually. And that's actually a very good analogy for it. There's been something I've been thinking of, and actually, this is a worry. I know you might disagree with me on this, but with Anthony Joshua, right? Because we can see he's trying to put on the tough guy persona, the chest out. The first thing people said, a lot of people I saw say after it, was that AJ needs to get heavier. And maybe if he sees himself as being the tough guy, he feels he needs to spend more time in the weight room. And I think that when AJ has more muscle on him, he is a lot slower, a lot more stationary, a lot more stiff, and he burns energy a lot faster. Do you think that could be a potential risk that he comes into this fight too heavy? And it just makes it easier for Usyk, in my opinion.
So I totally understand where you're coming from. I do. But I also think there are trade-offs to certain things. If he is more muscular, in theory, he would be physically stronger. He's been doing those weights for a reason. Right? If his idea is, let me get close and try and affect the balance of Usyk, let me lean on him, let me fight like a big man and affect his construct, it may suit him to be a bigger, heavier man. The trade-off to that is his stamina will go. If his focus is, right, let me lower the volume. When he comes in, I'm going to have a high guard. I'm going to protect myself. Let Usyk do the majority of the work. I'll take center ring. Then when I find the opportunity to get close, I'm going to lean on this man. At one point in the first fight, he tried to grab Usyk's head. He tried to get his left hand behind Usyk's head and launch in uppercuts. And when he tried to do that, Usyk instantly covered up by bringing his elbows in closer to protect.
Yep. I think we just muted you there, Chris. See how that goes? Try muting. Oh, yeah. So try putting yourself back on mute there, mate. Yeah, he's gone. There we go. Sounds. Yeah, that's better now.
Don't know what happened there. But yeah, I was saying how there was one point where he tried to grab Oleksandr Usyk from the back of the head and start to launch an uppercut. First thing Usyk did was protect the temples, and by tucking in his elbow, he cut off the trajectory for the uppercut to come underneath. And immediately he started to back off frenetically. It looked almost panicked, but it was not a panic per se. No. It was just very quickly, I need to get out of this pocket. Yeah. And what he was doing is taking away AJ's ability to hold him and then throw the uppercut. Now, had AJ had been physically stronger in that moment, maybe he would have thrown Usyk about in a way that would have affected his construct and enabled him to go to work. Now, like I said, there's a trade-off. There's a flip side to that. Had AJ come in more muscular, like you're saying, he would have gassed earlier. Through 8 rounds, I actually had it level. I had it 4 rounds apiece. After that, I didn't have AJ winning a single round. So I had it 8-4 to Usyk. Had he gassed earlier in that fight, or he tried to put it on Usyk earlier in that fight, he could have got stopped. The point I'm making here is that maybe Anthony Joshua does need to think, right, I'm either going for the knockout or I'm getting stopped myself. In which case, does he feel physically stronger or that he can take a better shot when he's bigger? Because he ate some big shots against the likes of Carlos Takam, and he was big back then, and he seemed to take them. Did he feel as though he could take a shot better, or is the panic about getting hit a psychological thing rather than a physical thing since the Ruiz loss? We don't know. They're going to know deep down what goes on in his mind. They're going to have to be honest with each other, have a few honest conversations. Based on how I believe he should take the fight, I don't think he should come in heavier or more muscular. I agree with you. But if he did, it's not necessarily this stupid idea, depending on what their tactics are going to be. You see what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, 100%. I think that it can work in certain ways, but if he plans on doing exactly the same thing as he did the first time, with no changes, but just being heavier, I don't think that's going to be a good idea at all. Try and box with Usyk, but just be heavier.
Yeah. No, I mean, I wouldn't have thought that, because I get, again, though, G-Man, it depends. When we say try to box with him, are we talking about matching him for volume? If he's trying to match him for volume, punch for punch, have a boxing match, I agree. But let's say he thinks of it more like a Deontay Wilder type approach, whereby I'm going to give up rounds. My aim is not to beat Oleksandr Usyk on points. I'm going to let him have the more voluminous activities. But there will come a point in every round where I will line him up with 1 or 2 big shots, and I'm hoping to take him out. If that's the case, you're still boxing with someone because you're not going after them ultra aggressive, trying to cut off the ring and make it a dirty brawl. You're still focusing on how to line him up and time him, but your focus is more along the lines of I'm going for the knockout rather than to win the fight on points. So again, does that extra muscle mass make him feel that he takes a better shot, and perhaps even he feels physically stronger, and maybe he feels that he punches harder? You know, that mass and velocity, ultimately from a scientific perspective, mass and velocity is what equates to power. Now, people that have been in the gym understand that technique plays a role as well and things like that.
Definitely.
But we know that AJ's got good punching technique. So if he feels that that extra mass is going to enable him to be more heavy-handed, maybe he feels that's the way to go. It's hard to know if you haven't worked specifically with AJ. But yeah, I personally, for the tactics I think he should go for, wouldn't suggest he comes in heavier, but it's not necessarily a terrible decision based on how they want to approach it.
It's so interesting to me, though, this fight, because it's something you said at the very start. AJ, throughout his career, he's always had pressure. And I kind of got the impression that, like, at some point, even very early, that pressure would have told. Now, he had pressure going into this fight because it's the rematch. He's under pressure to perform, he's under pressure to get his titles back. But I just find that maybe having the zone kind of thing playing over him as well, the fact that from now on, after this fight, he is going to be on the zone. The zone have made an investment in him, and he's made an investment in the zone. Does that equate to even more pressure on AJ, knowing that this is on Sky, but he's done with Sky, that from now on, he is going to be a DAZN fighter, and going there, coming off the back potentially of a loss, a bad loss maybe at that, is going to hinder DAZN and him, because he's a stakeholder in DAZN now, if I'm not mistaken.
You're 100% right. And based on that perspective, this is the biggest fight of Anthony Joshua's career, because there is that uncertainty about what happens to him as an asset afterwards, as a product. How much does he sell? What does he do? Where does he go from here? He's always going to have options. But to be the superstar of British boxing and of world boxing, him and Canelo the last number of years have been the cash cows, right? To continue that, he has to really win this fight. So the knock-on effect of that is bound to have a lot more pressure on him. This is definitely the biggest fight of his career based on that. And also, when you consider the first Ruiz fight, I actually had a bet on Ruiz winning the first fight, because I felt as though Andy Ruiz had much faster hands up close, and that AJ would think about fighting aggressively and allowing Ruiz to get into the pocket. And so I knew there was a significant risk there. However, the second fight, I actually picked AJ, because I felt now that AJ had learned from that, In this case, though, this is the first time I believe that Anthony Joshua has been in a ring against somebody who is, apart from maybe Klitschko, who was, in the twilight of his career. This is the first time that AJ himself might look at and say, this guy is actually better than me. Doesn't mean I can't win, but he's a better boxer. And so the pressure of that as well, combined with what becomes of AJ as a product afterwards, it's a big deal, man.
I've got to throw something out there now. And this is just something that I think about these things. And in a way, now I know it's not going to help him short term, but in a way, if losing this fight, AJ does decide to carry on, could that in some ways be a blessing in disguise? Because it means that way that the pressure is off for his next few fights. He can work with Robert Garcia, he can work with Angel Fernandez. I know he's not in his 20s anymore, but he's not old. He's not an old man. Do you think that this maybe gives him a bit of freedom for the next year to try and develop? Because there's still development there, I think, in AJ. That if he did lose, it wouldn't be a disaster in terms of his boxing fundamentals, in terms of his development as a fighter. So do you think that could potentially happen? I know with the Zone, they want him in the big fights because they made an investment in him.
Well, I mean, traditionally, being able to work without pressure is a good thing, right? But in the modern day that we're in, with the very reactive sort of fans that you get on social media and stuff, one defeat and you see fighters completely written off. Yeah. And so I'm not sure that he would even be able to contemplate that, because even if he does go and work on things and he improves a bit as a fighter, he'll come back and what's he going to say? I really want to fight, Tyson Fury? Fury's going to say there's no point. One of the things that's happened in the modern day is that you get fighters that get credit for the another fighter losing, who at the hands of somebody who's considered a lesser fighter than the other guy. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, Deontay Wilder when AJ lost to Ruiz.
Yeah, exactly. So, Deontay Wilder would destroy AJ because Deontay Wilder would beat Ruiz. That's the theory behind it, right? And so because these things happen in the modern day, I don't know, man. I think he'd get written off. I think he'd start, especially if he starts to make less money for DAZN or whoever, you're going to get a lot of fighters that will think, well, he doesn't offer me that payday anymore. Why would I get in a ring with a guy like Anthony Joshua? And you can start getting in that who needs me club. You see what I'm saying? So I don't know. I think this is vital for him to win. That's just where I see it.
That's why it's so intriguing. There's so much riding on this fight. And honestly, mate, I cannot wait for this fight. And it's interesting to see what happens with AJ if he does take an L moving forward with DAZN, because it's going to sashay into what I'm going to talk about next, right? Eddie Hearn recently gave an IFL interview last week, and he talked about Dylan White. Now, he said that he's reached out to Dylan White with an offer to go with DAZN, but he said Sky and BT Sport have also given him offers. Now, I just thought about it from the outside looking in, and I thought DAZN for Dylan White is the best move, because Eddie Hearn at the start would probably still treat Dylan White as an A-side fighter. But with Sky and BT, I suspect there's a good chance that they'll both be looking to use Dylan White's name to get over, Daniel Dubois or Joe Joyce into a big fight that they'd hopefully win. I'm sure that's what Frank Warren's thinking. Likewise, Ben Shalom with Joseph Parker. What are your thoughts on that?
So what you're saying is you think DAZN would have his best interests at heart, whereas the others might not?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah, I mean, look, Dillian White is still going to be a draw.
Yeah.
For sure. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, I know you feel as though his punch resistance is completely gone, and that may be the case. But he has been in there and hurt by guys that are top level guys. I mean, I know Povetkin was the twilight of his career, but his short power is exceptional. That uppercut, if it does land on anyone, they're in serious trouble. Then you've got Tyson Fury, who's at the top of his game at the moment, came in very heavy, and another big uppercut. So is it a case of him getting wobbled by jabs and stuff like that? Maybe the decline of White has been a little bit exaggerated. In other words, I'm not ready to say he's done, he's finished. With that said, though, if other sort of promoters are looking at this guy and thinking, you know what, he's shaky, he's done, they may end up putting him in with a Dubois, thinking it's a setup. But with Dubois, there are some question marks there as well about him. Dillian White's got dog in him. If he's able, if he's not as chinny now as a lot of people feel, what happens if that fight starts to become a really grueling, hard fight? Is Daniel Dubois ready mentally to overcome his own demons? So he's in that dangerous sort of who needs him sort of club as well. And he's got options. And he was always a free agent, and he always had that ability to jump between one and the other. If he's losing those options now, I'm sure he's going to look at it from the perspective of how do I go about maximizing what I can get financially speaking. And based on that, maybe the zone would be the best way to go, because if Anthony Joshua was to lose to Usyk, then you've got a major opportunity there for a fight, and that would sell, and that's a big money fight.
That's what I was thinking. And as well as that, Chisora wants probably one last big payday. There you go. I'm sure Dylan White, Chisora 3 could still do decent numbers at the O2.
Oh, for sure. And that's going to be a barn burner.
And it's going to be a barn burner. And Dylan White probably would fancy his chances a lot more against Chisora than I'm sure he'd fancy chances against all of them, but you'd look at it and say, it's a fight where I can really only see Dylan White winning against Chisora at this stage.
Well, the thing is, as well, with Dillian White and Chisora, it's got that appeal with the casual fan base as well. And if he wants to catapult himself back into the big time, because he would have taken a bit of a PR damage after that after that Tyson Fury. If he can beat Derek Chisora, all of a sudden that casual fan's going to say, okay, he still looks $1 million. Let's get him in there in another big fight. So again, I definitely see it potentially going that way. He's probably going to wait out though to see how the AJ Usyk fight goes, because if AJ does beat Usyk, AJ's going to be looking at the Fury fight. In which case, the options might be a little bit different.
I think that the AJ Fury fight is an interesting one, because I'm kind of convincing myself now at this stage that if AJ wins, we're seeing him versus Fury next. But if Usyk wins, I really am unsure what we're going to see with Tyson Fury, whether he carries on or not then at that stage. I think he himself is probably holding out and waiting to see who wins that fight before making his own decision.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's very difficult for me to ever question whether Tyson Fury would be willing to face these guys, because he has proven that he's willing to take big fights and on the road. He took the Klitschko fight on the road. He took the Wilder fight on the road when he was out for such a long period of time.
Crazy.
So, yes, I don't want to sit here and automatically say he'd be ducking Usyk. I don't want to say that, right? It's just a big claim to make for a guy that hasn't really shown that he's got that in him. Having said that, I do think that he feels and he knows that Oleksandr Usyk is a much bigger threat than the general narrative is. This idea of blown up middleweight, that's rubbish. He's a serious boxer. And when you look at some of the things that Tyson Fury has said in the past, it betrays a little bit about what he really thinks. So, for instance, in the past, he said cruiserweights hit harder than heavyweights because although they're very big men, they're a lot faster. So you don't see the shot coming in. Coming, that hurts. That's the first thing. The second thing, when you hear the sparring stories, and some of them might not be true, but some of them might have some truth to them, it tends to be heavyweights that are a bit more mobile and sudden. They're on the outside and all of a sudden they're inside quickly and they land a big shot. They're the ones that tend to give Fury more problems, whether it's in the ring, if you're talking about people like Coleman or Tovar Lean, who's not massive heavyweight and he's more about his speed, whether you're talking about Jared Anderson, according to the sparring rumors.
Remember that?
Yeah, Hunter, according to the sparring rumors. So it's those fast and nimble guys that maybe can match Fury for his agility that might cause him some problems. And yet, for the casual fan, unless Usyk really does a number on AJ, for the casual fan, they're not going to see Usyk in the same way as they would an AJ Fury fight. So he might be looking at this and thinking, if they're not going to offer me the big money, is it worth the trade-off? It's a risk versus reward factor. But again, I'm speculating because Fury's never really showed that. Fury's shown a willingness to take risks, So I don't know, but he does seem more willing for an AJ fight than an Usyk fight.
Well, I think the AJ fight for me personally, right? I think you might say I'm selling AJ short here, but I would make Tyson Fury firm favorite against Anthony Joshua at this stage, even if he wins against Oleksandr Usyk. But Usyk, I'm sure Fury looks at that and thinks, there's a good chance he could turn me over. He's not going to admit that, but I'm sure looking at Usyk, he knows the trouble Usyk would cause him. I'm sure he looks at Joshua and thinks, it's a much easier night with you.
He probably thinks that way. But I do think Anthony Joshua is also a significant threat. I think all these top guys are. I'm not, I tend to be quite unbiased on my channel, I'd like to think. And so I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I think this is an easy fight. None of these fights are easy for any of the top guys. The top guys will always give other top guys a tough night. Now, stylistically, Oleksandr Usyk is a bigger threat to Fury than AJ is, in my humble opinion, just on paper, stylistically speaking. Anthony Joshua is still very heavy-handed. And I know a lot of people will say, but Wilder's an even bigger puncher. The difference is that Anthony Joshua he carries power in all these shots, not just one shot.
Yep.
Deontay Wilder has a telegraph on that right hand. He will always step in behind a long jab. I spoke about this in the preview to the third fight. He'll step in behind a long jab. And in the first fight, one of the things that the second fight, one of the things that Tyson Fury was able to see and cope with instantly was the moment that step forward jab would come in, Fury would instantly raise his arms and take a step back. And by raising his arms, he was cutting off the trajectory for that right hand, which would often come from around the chest area, and he'd whip it around. He's cutting off the trajectory to it. So once he figured out how to take away Wilder's right hand, Wilder was in serious trouble. With Anthony Joshua, although he doesn't hit as hard as Deontay Wilder in terms of that one long right hand from Wilder, I think it's a bigger punch than anything AJ throws. AJ has heavy-handed power in every shot. Jab,
everything.
Left hook, right hook, watch, everything.
Great uppercuts on the inside.
Great uppercuts on the inside. He's good to the body. He's got good hand speed in terms of short hand speed. When he throws those hooks, they're very fast. So dealing with what AJ has to offer offensively, there's a lot more going on. You have to be more switched on, so to speak, even though Wilder can clean out your clock in an instant. So it's a different sort of threat. It's different. And so Tyson Fury, I think, is not stupid. He knows that AJ would also be a hard fight. And it's certainly a much tougher fight than he sort of projects to the public, I believe. That's my opinion. But also, when you look at Tyson Fury, he's at his best when he sees a threat. You know, when you look at Fury and he thinks, I'm going to walk this, whether it is, you know, the Varleen fight, the Cunningham fight, the third Deontay Wilder fight, after he decimated him, he's not as good. Whereas when he sees a real threat, when he thinks, you know what, there's a danger here, then he's sharp. And I think deep down, he knows that both AJ and Usyk, for different reasons, are significant threats. So I think he would come in, you know, ready for either one, to be honest. And he'd be confident, I believe, in beating either one. But I agree with you. He probably thinks AJ stylistically is more tailor-made for me than Oleksandr Usyk.
Oh, yeah, definitely. This is the thing about the heavyweight division, though, that I find so interesting. And, you know, I love the history of boxing. I love history in general, but the history of boxing. The heavyweight division is one of those divisions where even if you think you know the result before it happens, you never really know because heavyweight boxing is just so unpredictable. Throughout the course of the given history of boxing, it's been that way since the get-go. Since the start of Queensberry rules, it's been like that.
And that's why when you see these long unbeaten heavyweight runs, whether you're talking about Fury now or you're talking about Rocky Marciano, the long run that Larry Holmes went on, it's incredible because unlike other divisions, a single shot in the heavyweight division from a guy that's a lot lesser than you could literally turn you on your head in a split second. Whereas if you're a welterweight, say, and you are just significantly more skilled than somebody else, unless you make a big error, you're probably going to come through the fight. So there's that equalizer. It's known as an equalizer for a reason in the heavyweight division. And that's why it's incredible when you see these guys go through this long, unbeaten sort of run. And Fury's always said, by the way, that he's not bothered about the record of the O. He just wants to fight the best and leave a great legacy. Well, I tell you something, if he is willing to take these big risks and he was to fight both of them, not just the winner, he was to say, I want to clear out everyone in my day. And he was to beat AJ and Usyk. Well, now you're looking at AJ, Usyk, White, Wilder, Klitschko. That's an incredible CV.
You're taking the best of this and that, current and former.
You see what I'm saying? And that's what, you know, now you're talking about him really being in the conversation for being the greatest. He's going to be there. He's there. I don't believe you can ever definitively say this person's the greatest or that person is, but you have a collection of guys that are elite. And he would be there, in my humble opinion. And listen, AJ's not far from it either. Let's not forget, if he beats Usyk now, let's say he was to get revenge and he was to look
great
good.
win.
And then he goes and beats Fury as well. Well, Lennox Lewis had to avenge defeats. Muhammad Ali had to avenge defeats. So there's no reason that these guys, it's such a stacked division in this day and age, that if they're willing to take the risk, greatness beckons for whoever comes out on top. And that's why I hope we do get to see all these fights.
And that's why I love the heavyweight division. Like I said, it's always been, I know some of the lighter divisions have a lot more skill and I love them too, but there's something special about heavyweights. Just when they get in the ring, things change. Even if you're there ringside watching, there's something special about that division.
I'm with you, bro. For me, it's just there's a magic about the heavyweight division
Oh,
that's
it
just
is.
different. And I love boxing. I love all the, I'm somebody that loves even the smaller weight categories. But
Exactly.
heavyweight, there's something special about it, man. It's there's something
There's
different.
that feel you get when you see two big men in the ring. You just know, regardless of talent, either or could knock the other guy spark out with one shot. Whereas, as you said, with a welterweight fight, if one guy is better, he's probably going to win, unless he makes an absolute howler.
Yeah, and you know what else it is as well, G man. Let's be honest. It's also the question mark of who's really the, as the phrase goes, the baddest man on the planet. Now I know you've got MMA and UFC or whatever, but at least in a boxing ring, you can be whether you're a Terence Crawford guy or an Errol Spence guy. If either one of them got in the ring with even a mediocre heavyweight, they're going to get knocked out. All right. So if you're just talking about who's the man, who is the dude that no one can beat right now, it's going to be a cruiserweight or a heavyweight. It's going to be one of those two weight categories. And so for me, I don't know that I'm more drawn to that in the sense that yes, there are others that have more skill and I can appreciate that and I love that too. But this is the baddest man on the planet, at least from a boxing perspective. And I think that adds a bit of magic to it as well, you know.
What was it John L. Sullivan said? You're the emperor of masculinity. Was the
There
original.
you
That was
go.
the original one he said. And I love that one. I love that. That to me is the best you could imagine being called that you're the emperor of masculinity. I mean, that you can't, that's the best.
Didn't he once walk into a bar as well and sit down a challenge? And he said, I can whoop any man in this room.
He did indeed.
A lightweight, as good as he is, cannot do that.
No.
Right? Lomachenko, Devin Haney, whoever you think is the king of the lightweights, he's not going to walk into a room full of. I remember once Paul Malignaggi was given an interview in a press conference, and they said to him that these journalists were mocking him about his lack of punching power. And Paulie got wound up, and he was saying, "Hold on a sec, you guys do understand, all you journalists that are saying I'm pillow fisted or whatever, you're talking about an elite level. I would knock anyone out in this room within one round, any of you." And he's looking at all the journalists, and he didn't realize Bernard Hopkins was behind him. And at one point, Bernard went and put his hands on his shoulders, and Paulie looked over and started laughing because Paulie knew even if he was a puncher at lightweight or light welter, whatever division he was at the time, you're not beating a guy who's a super middleweight, right? Middleweight, super middleweight. Well, by the same token, that middleweight, yes, you get some exceptional circumstances where special fighters that can go up through weight categories, but generally speaking, the heavyweight is the emperor of masculinity, as you put it, when it comes to the fight.
Now, you mentioned middleweights there. I know you're kind of pressed for time, so we're going to finish it up with this. It was announced today, Canelo versus Triple G3, which is a fight that the more I'm looking at it, thinking, the more excited I am about it. It is going to be on pay-per-view on DAZN in the US and in the UK. I think it's 70 quid in the US, but it's 10 quid here in the UK. If you are a subscriber, if you're not, I think it's $17.95 with 1 month free with DAZN. What are your thoughts on that? DAZN, we thought it would be end pay-per-view, but to be expected almost in a way over the last few years.
Look, first and foremost, I think it's a terrific fight. I cannot wait for it. I'm not in that category of people that are saying, oh, Triple G's completely washed up. Because part of me thinks that this could actually be very exciting because with Golovkin perhaps a little bit vulnerable to the body at this age, he might know I can't go at a high tempo for 12 rounds. So if I've got to get him out of there, I've got to break something. I've got to break his jaw. I've got to break his orbital bone. I've got to knock this guy out early when I'm fresh. And Canelo seems to have real spite for him. So they could come out, center ring, both of them. The first fight, it was Canelo moving away. Second fight was Golovkin moving away. I felt Golovkin won both fights. I thought the first fight, he walked him down. The second fight, I felt he outboxed him, couldn't miss with the jab. Regardless, stylistically, there was one that submitted the center ring. In this fight, you could end up seeing both guys say, nah, I'm taking the center ring, I'm hurting you. So it could be a terrific fight for as long as it lasts. But it's one thing whereby you're a hardcore boxing fan, and everybody who will be watching this video on a stream, if you're watching this, you're a hardcore boxing fan.
Yeah.
But you have to understand, when it comes to pay-per-view, the theory is that a fight is so big, it's so great, that to fund it, you need income from casuals. You have to understand the fight's going to be on at like 4 or 5 in the morning here in the UK. And to me, it's very short-sighted. You've seen Bob Arum recently say that the reason, and I've done a video on this sort of thing, a recent video, I think it might be my last video. Bob Arum was talking about how piracy, in other words, stealing the fight on a stream, is preventing from Bud Crawford fighting Errol Spence because the fight can't be sold. Well, when you push people into a corner by continually demanding more and more money from them, they're going to get to the point where they're going to say, I'm a hardcore boxing fan, I really want to see this fight, but I can't afford to do this. They're going to be paying pay-per-view for Usyk AJ. They're going to be paying pay-per-view for Golovkin and Canelo. They're going to be paying subscriptions to DAZN. They're paying subscription to Sky, and then on top of that, any other pay-per-views that are coming out from Sky, for BT. This is about people that want to watch all the boxing, right? That's available. It adds up, and we're in a difficult time financially around the world at the moment, and it's going to get worse. And there are people that have got children, and they've got, they've got less and less disposable income. And so for me, I think it's a little bit short-sighted from DAZN at 4 a.m. to do this. I think your aim should be to try and get as many people subscribing as possible. And this is dangling a carrot in front of them for people that don't already have a subscription. Upping the price is going to make somebody who was on the fence about this fight turn around and say, oh, you know what, man, maybe Golovkin is washed up. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. It's kind of like they're looking and thinking, oh, I might watch this fight, but then you're dangling that over them. You're saying, I think Golovkin might be washed up, but I have to pay 20 quid basically for it. Nah, I'll go stream it.
And at that time of the day as well. If it was at 8 p.m. UK time, you might get someone that says, you know what, it's Saturday night, I've got nothing to do, I might as well pay £10, for argument's sake.
Yeah.
At 4 or 5 in the morning, you're just fleecing the hardcores because you're not going to get any more.
No, it's an unsociable time for us over here.
Yeah, and listen, I've been defending DAZN. A lot of people have been unhappy with their cards. I actually think their cards have been very, very entertaining. You're getting some good fights from DAZN. But I don't know, man. You've got to know when to sort of rein back the greed a little bit. That's my take on it.
I think even if they did something like, I know it's on at an unsociable time, but even if they could bring it back by a couple of hours, I'm not sure how that would work in the States, but maybe 1 a.m. would be tolerable, I think. And they've done it at 11 o'clock our time with fights in the States before. Do you reckon they could maybe try something like that?
I think the biggest market that they have to take into account is the Mexican and Mexican-American market. And so I think they're going to do everything they can to make sure that it first and foremost suits them. So I can't really see that happening at all. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It's a great fight.
That's a tremendous fight.
I will be paying for it,
As will I.
My issue is not so much me having a moan up. It's more a case of me just thinking that it's a bit short-sighted from DAZN. It's not the tactical approach that I think they should be taking. But listen, they've got people that work on these things. If they think that's going to work for them, good luck to them.
Do you think the incentive for the new subscribers, offering them a month now, this is going to be in September 17th? We have had, it's been a bit disappointing because I would expect DAZN would have pushed on a bit, but we're hearing about fights, but we're not seeing any cards made. Do you think Eddie Hearn is going to pull something out the bag, knowing that he's giving potentially new subscribers a month on top of what they're paying for, the Canelo fight? And do you think he's going to try and get a good few cards out between the Canelo fight and the end of that month?
Well, if the idea is that this is not a standalone pay-per-view and the tactical aim of DAZN is let's get people in and hopefully we'll get them hooked, they have to then produce a lot of content.
Oh, they have to.
And they have to produce content, by the way, that's going to appeal to the casual fan. And that goes beyond fight cards. So I'll give you an example. Do you remember they did this thing? I think it was Golovkin meeting Ronaldo, and they had this little documentary or whatever. Do something like that. Do 2 or 3 things like that, whereby a casual will think, oh, wow, look.
I want to watch that. Yeah, I want to watch that.
It's a World Cup year. Get some international footballers doing a few things with some top-level professional fighters, whether that's Anthony Joshua, who you're going to have, with Harry Kane, say, for argument's sake, the England captain, whatever it might be. Canelo Alvarez, maybe with Raul Jimenez, the Mexican striker, whatever it might be smart about how you're going to draw people in. Play on the fact that it's a World Cup year and do something that's going to apply to casuals, because when you are DAZN, your aim is not just to get the hardcore fans. The hardcore fans, whether we're 100% happy or not, we're probably going to look at it and say, I'm going to get DAZN because they're going to put on a few good cards and I want to see them. But the casual is where the key element is. Capture the casual and you start to grow your business. So for me, they've got to be smart about the content they're going to produce.
The one thing that people have touched on about DAZN, I know Hatman's touched on it, is the accessibility. And it's still not going to get any easier, even putting this on pay-per-view with anything else, because it's an early morning start. You're trying to get subscribers this side of the Atlantic. No pub's going to put that on at 4 o'clock in the morning, and no pubs are showing DAZN. Like literally none. I mean, that's a big issue.
100%, that's a big issue. The problem they've got though is the fact that DAZN was initially, and it still is really relatively cheap compared to the alternatives. You see, a lot of people don't realize it because they subscribe to Sky anyway because of football. A lot of them are crossover fans. So they don't see it as, oh, I'm paying this amount for boxing. They see it as, I'm paying this amount for football. Well, more often than not, like the card at the weekend, which is brilliant, Chris Billiam-Smith and Isaac Chamberlain, I'm going to get free boxing with it. That's brilliant. But when you consider it, if imagine you were just a boxing fan, you had to pay what you're paying for Sky as a package. Well, now DAZN starts to look a lot cheaper. And so one of the reasons they were able to sort of go down this route is because they don't have those costs of having to pay the sort of money they would need to have a channel at their disposal on, say, Virgin or Sky or whatever it might be. And by lowering those costs, they're able to then not pass that on to the customer. If they were to try and improve accessibility in terms of being on a platform which is literally a TV channel that you can flip across and you can see it as though, you know, you've got Sky Sports, BT, DAZN pops up and just looking through the channel. That would be great. The thing is, if they're not going to do that and they're going to stay as an app, then getting football is
a must.
It's a must.
There's no question there.
Yeah, and when they failed at that, that was a bitter blow. Because again, your aim is crossover fans. What is going to draw over someone who's not a massive boxing fan? It's going to be a football fan who's going to get to watch loads of Premier League football, Champions League football, Europa League football, international football, whatever it might be. And then I've also got the boxing there available to me. That's the key. So you've either got to have accessibility on a TV platform, or you've got to have something so enticing that it draws people to your app. You can't have it both ways. And I think that's the error that is going on at the moment with DAZN. That's the area of concern that they've got. How do they bridge that gap?
I think Eddie Hearn still must be kicking himself over a certain thing he did. I think it was last year, and it wasn't just leaving Sky and going to DAZN. For those who know, Eddie Hearn is the chairman of the PDC, which is the largest darts corporation in the world. They're like the governing body of darts. They have an exclusive deal with Sky Sports, right? Darts be one of the biggest sports in the UK, not as big as football and other sports, but it's right up there. Now, he signed the deal, I think it was the start of last year, for 3 years with Sky Sports. And in the summer, brought Matchroom Boxing to DAZN. I'm sure if you could give him a time machine, he'd go back and say, that not going to happen. That's going to DAZN too. Because you'd entice fans. Because you see darts on in the pub at Christmas with the World Championships.
100%, but you've just hit the nail on the head. That's the point I was just going to make. Darts is often a sport that a lot of people watch in pubs. If DAZN can't be available in pubs, that goes back to the accessibility issue. So, you know, the majority of people that will watch darts will want to have a little drink, you know, beer in hand, and they'll watch it with their mates. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there aren't people that also watch it at home, but the primary area where you're going to get people watching it together is going to be in a pub. So again, it goes back to that accessibility issue. Yeah, it's all well and good having the sport there. But is it a sport that's either going to drive a whole bunch of people to start subscribing and saying, I'll watch this at home if necessary? If not, and I think only football does that, only football is quite big. Or is it an accessibility issue whereby, yes, I can go to a pub and watch it with friends? Do you see what I'm saying? They need to address it. They haven't got the balance right. And listen, I want DAZN to succeed.
So do I. It's a terrific platform.
It's terrific. I miss Box Nation, you know, and I would miss DAZN if it was gone. For us hardcore boxing fans, we need to want these things to work. A lot of people seem to affiliate with certain promoters, and I've never gotten that. Oh, I'm an Eddie Hearn guy. I'm Matchroom FC. Oh, I'm a PBC guy. I'm a Frank Warren guy. What are you chatting about? You're a boxing fan. Don't you want to see as much boxing as you want to get your hands on at a good cost? When Eddie Hearn was saying it's going to be the death of pay-per-view, I saw a lot of people that were delighted when he started to flop. What's wrong with you? You want to be paying pay-per-view? I would love that to have been the case, and for Sky. And
it would have been tremendous.
Would have been brilliant. But that's the point. A lot of people affiliate with certain promoters, and they almost want these things to fail. Don't support the sport. Do you see what I'm saying? So they've got. I want them to succeed, but they get the balance wrong. And I agree with you. Darts was huge. Missing out on the football, huge. These were big errors from DAZN, and they need to find a way to address it.
Yeah, look, I've said this once, I'll say it again. One thing I've said about DAZN is that they do. I think DAZN are a little bit too corporate, I should say, for a sport like boxing. I think Eddie Hearn needs to address not everyone, but certain members of the broadcasting. I think he needs to get, as Hatman said, characters on there. When he had David Hay and Barry Jones, it did make you forget about Mike. I know I'm going on about Mike Costello again, but it did make you forget when you have characters who you can just feed off their energy. It was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't hate Mike Costello, to be honest with you. I know a lot of people love him, and I know a lot of people find him a bit dull, so he divides opinion. When it comes to these things, it's personal taste. I do agree with you and Hatman that characters is always a good thing. That's always going to draw people over. I do think they do have a lot of good characters already. They could always add some. I thought that. Do you remember the story about Paulie Malignaggi and the reason? Apparently, Paulie said,
yeah,
that, he spat at someone who was getting really out of line with him or something, and obviously you can't condone that. But Frank Smith, he was saying, banned him and sort of ensured that he would be struggling to get work elsewhere. I think Paulie was really loved at one point on Sky, and they've done really well to get Barry Jones in because he's another one that was.
He's
loved.
tremendous.
Yeah. So, I think there are a lot of guys out there who have their idea of what's great sort of TV, but you're never going to please everyone, because I've seen a lot of people feel that Paulie Malignaggi talks too much and how he doesn't shut up, and you're never going to please everyone. G-Man, put it this way. You could go on to, one of those FHM sexiest women in the world or whatever. You could have the top 10, and you could sit down with your group of boys, and one of them will say, whoever's at number 7, I don't actually like her. And your other friend will say, what are you talking about? She's amazing. And you're sitting there, you see the boys arguing. These are women that are considered the top 10 sexiest in the world. And even they're not going to appeal to everyone. So what chance does an analyst have? You're going to have some people, I get so many lovely compliments on my channel from people that love the channel. And I'll get people that think I'm annoying and they can't stand to watch my channel. I don't understand why they come to comment on there. But the point is, you're loved and hated by so many people. That's just how it is. So
that's how you know you're doing well.
Everyone. Sorry, mate.
That's how you know you're doing well.
Well, no, I mean, I've got no delusions of grandeur. I know that I'm, a small channel, but that's the point. If even a small channel can get that, imagine these big sort of DAZN companies with these big analysts that are renowned and stuff. You're never going to please everyone. So there are going to be people that love Costello. There are going to be people that don't. There are going to be people that love David Hay. There are going to be others that don't. And I guess just finding that right balance, again, it's going to be good for the zone if they don't feel that they found it. But for me, the issue is not really about that. For me, it is that question of accessibility.
Oh, of course. And just to finish on this, it's not just that. It's the fact that the app isn't available on all TVs. I've talked about this before. I've got a TV in my sitting room, Toshiba. Can't get the zone on. Doesn't have the app.
I've got a Sony upstairs that I can't get it on, and I've got one downstairs that I can get it on. And if it's an early night, if it's a fight early, and I don't know, there's people downstairs, there's guests around or whatever, I can't just sort of say, tell the missus to throw them all out and I'm watching boxing. Yeah. So I have to avoid the fight and then watch it later on because I don't want it ruined for me. So yeah, that can happen too. I agree with you. That's another problem. That it doesn't work on all smart TVs. So yeah, man, it's one of those where they're definitely going to have to address it.
100%. Well, mate, I know you need to go off now in a wee bit, so we can end this here. Before we go, plug that channel one more time, Chris Andre Boxing.
I will do so. Chris Andre Boxing. You can find me on YouTube. Like I said, I do technical breakdowns. We try to analyze various themes in boxing from an angle that maybe others haven't thought of. So we give you something different to think about, maybe a different angle. Before I go, I also want to give a little shout out to someone. You should really. Someone's put out a super chat. I don't want you to miss it, G-Man.
Just read it pop up. I don't even have to.
There you go.
Big up the base, the kid. Thank you. I wasn't even looking at the chat there, to be honest with you, mate. Thank you, mate. Appreciate that.
So yeah, thank you to everyone that's tuned in. I hope I do see you across at the other channel as well, and look forward to hearing everybody's views. And needless to say, G-Man, before too long, I want you on my channel too.
Anytime, mate. Appreciate it. People, we'll talk to you.
Take care, everyone.